Alrighty, welcome back. We're going to do lesson 4 today. Make sure I'm not going to do it for you today, but I want you to go up to your table of contents page, highlight lesson 4, date it, come back, meet me here, let's go. So the 2 dot points we're looking at today, this is where we're getting into the content of the syllabus. Okay, so if I show you the syllabus page here, I'll just get it to where it needs to be. There she is. So we're looking at the social and cultural words. So we've done the concepts now. These ones we are going to, some of them we've done, but we are going to, like micro, meso, macro we're going to look at today, we're going to incorporate these as we learn. So that's how we're going to do those ones. And this is stuff that I integrate across the way. So we're always using contemporary examples, and we're going to be assessing the impact of technology as we go too. So as you can see, the first couple of dot points here, an overview of the multicultural and hybrid nature of society, and then persons and interactions with individuals, blah, 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 blah. So I've put those 2 here, so they're always in harmony with the syllabus, so don't stress there. Alright, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. We are going to be looking into a very sort of brief and surface level concept of how people interact with society, at what levels do they interact with society, and how that kind of gives us a nice little overview of the multicultural and hybrid nature of society and culture. So to start off with, I've got a gorgeous Venn-ish diagram, not quite a Venn diagram, but kind of sort of, where the circles go and overlap. What I want you to do first is identify at least, so that's the bare minimum, bonus points if you do more. I want you to identify at least 3 people in your micro, meso and macro level. So that's 3 each, that's not 3 in total. So 3 micro, 3 meso, 3 macro. And I want you to try and link them with concepts as well, because we're always conceptually thinking society and culture. So, sorry, I burped again. For example, if I go my micro world, one person I might list is Patrick, my beautiful, gorgeous son. Alright, he is in my micro world because he's part of my family and he's part of my immediate sort of social microscopic interactions in society. That's my boy. If I'm going to link some concepts with him, I want you to try link 2 or 3 concepts. You can probably link everything all the time and then you'll be there for days. So just pick 2 or 3 concepts. You might want to annotate that above here, 2/3, just so you can keep yourself on track. And so 2 or 3 concepts I might associate with Patrick is identity. Okay, he's my son. I identify as his father. He hopefully identifies me as his dad too. He is very much part of the physical DNA of my family, so that concept works really well there. Another concept I might identify with him is gender, because he's my son. And he's very, he's aligning himself already very much with stereotypical gender stereotypes. Although I must say, we didn't encourage it, but he loves trucks, loves cars. We didn't put that on him at all. Or maybe we did implicitly. I'm just not sure. But he very much identifies with boy type things. So I'd probably put gender there too. And I might also put culture, because he's a white boy. So yeah, and I could honestly, I know I'm pushing the limit envelope here, but he might add a 4th one, power, because he's very good at persuading me to do things I shouldn't do, such as letting him watch Avatar or feeding him unhealthy snacks. Okay, so they're 3 concepts I might link with him. Then do the same with your meso. You might do your boss. Your boss might have authority over you. Your boss, you could put society. There's lots of different things you could put there. So I want you to pick at least 3 people from each level, and give a reason why. Hint: if you're really struggling, if you look over the next page, there's a few different types of people you can look at. Speaking of which, we're going to move on to here. So I want you to, as the first activity, highlight the following words in 3 different colors. So that might be micro is yellow, meso is pink, and macro is Tealy McBealy. So with that in mind, I then want you to coordinate and highlight with the same color the micro, meso, macro level influences. So I'm going to do one each for you. So for example, Mr. Brown, everyone's favorite teacher, is meso. Boom, there he is in the same color. Brother, now you may not have a brother, you may not have a sister, but pretend you do. Micro, they're a micro level influence. If I was to then look at a macro level instance, I might go the Prime Minister. Okay, Anthony Albanese. So there we go. I want you to do the rest and color code them whatever color they respond to. And I want you to also, once you've done that, go back and highlight your macro, meso, micros here in the same color. That's activity numero uno. The next one is I also want you to highlight the following social institutions according to whether they're a micro, meso, or macro social institution. So you've got Facebook, Google, home. Think of that almost like your family. I should probably write family down. Hospital, your local church, school, United Nations, university, workplace, whatever it may be. I want you to highlight whether it's a micro, meso, or macro level institution. The next activity I want you to do after that is and by the way, if you're just listening to me like ramble and go nuts, that's cool, but what I'd recommend you do is as soon as I finish explaining one activity, that you pause me, and I might be doing a funny face on the screen, but pause me, do that activity, and then hit play again. And it's just like we're learning in the classroom. How good's that? Anyway, next activity is a question, comprehension question. How do macro level institutions, so notice macro level, so you're not going to talk about micro or meso because I haven't asked you to. I'm asking you to do macro. It's very important you always read the wording of the question very carefully. So how do macro level institutions' decisions influence your meso or micro world? So you're not going to talk about meso and micro. It says or, which means one or the other. So you get to pick, does your macro level institution affect your meso or your micro world? I mean, it affects both, but just pick one and then provide an example or examples on how it does that. Notice the plural there means more than one. So you've got to give me more than one example there in the 3 lines that you have there. So that's to start us off thinking about micro, meso, macro interactions. The next activity I've got here is a word bank. Now, this is where we look at the concepts of continuity and change. Now, they only really briefly appear in Year 11 in this topic, but we're going to be looking at it throughout because, as I said, in Year 12, this is a really big, important concept. The other thing you might notice about this activity is that it is a word bank. So, I don't get you guys to write notes. I think, as well as a lot of educational researchers, that simply copying notes from the board is a giant waste of time. And so what we're going to, in most circumstances, you know, like if you're copying it and there's engagement and stuff, it's all sweet. But if it's just copy this down, thank yous, you know, it does nothing for your learning. However, the way we take notes, we're going to do a lot of different ways. A word bank or a closed passage is a really good way to do it because implicitly it's going to be building a lot of your literacy and grammar skills because you're going to try and be deducing where the missing words are, and most of the time those words are key concepts. So it's building your understanding, memorization, and rote learning of our core concepts, always getting you to think about them, which is good. The other thing too is it's helping your sentence structure. Your critical thinking and problem solving skill is trying to make sure that these words fit not only where they belong, but that it makes sense in the whole sentence overall. Okay, so there's a lot happening here. So this is why we do word banks instead of copying notes. Okay, so this is a more engaged way of note taking. So with that being said, we're going to read through this one together. Okay, actually I want you to, this is how we're going to do it. Pause now. Actually, well, not now. I haven't explained what I want you to do. Try to fill it in, see how you go, and then unpause, and I'm going to read it out and talk to you. Okay, so pause now and do it. All right, well done. So we're going to go through it. So in any society or culture, there will be elements that experience, and I'm not going to highlight and do it because I know some of you will just skip a few minutes ahead and just copy it in. So I'm going to say it out loud and you're just going to have to listen. So in any society or culture, there will be elements that experience continuity, just as there will be elements that have changed over time. I think a very self-explanatory and basic sentence there. Societies are dynamic, they're always changing, and at the same time they are keeping up with tradition and doing things in a continuity sort of sense. So actually after that, I want you to write a little annotation, little arrow here, this makes me know that you're watching my videos, is that society is dynamic. Write that in. So dynamic means it's changing and it's not changing at the same time. Nice. It's also important that these can be framed and recognized at a micro, meso, and macro level. Always thinking about those interactions. So something might change at a micro level, which then might change how something works at a macro level, and vice versa. So an example of that, if we do it the other way, a macro level change that has affected meso and micro levels is that, was it 7 years ago, whenever it was, the Marriage Equality Bill came out. I think it was 2016 maybe, I'm not exactly sure. That was a macro level legislative change that said that you can legally get married, man to man, woman to woman. Okay, so no longer was it just restricted to heterosexual couples. Marriage was now more equal to diverse sexualities, right? That was a macro level change. How that affected the meso level, right, is that certain institutions, such as churches, had to make a decision of whether or not they would affirm that legislation change at the macro level. Some did, some didn't. But it also meant at a meso level there was a lot more weddings happening, right? So it led to more celebrants and that sort of thing. So that's how a macro change has affected a meso change. But then at a micro level, it's now more affirming for homosexual couples or same-sex couples to have families that are considered culturally acceptable, because now that we view it acceptable at a macro level, and don't get me wrong, most of Australia viewed it as acceptable anyway, but that made it more legitimate at a micro level as well. So you can see how changes at one level can affect another level and vice versa. And you could probably argue that micro level beliefs in the families regarding same-sex marriage probably permeated, which meant it moved through the meso and macro levels of government anyway. So they kind of work in harmony or synergy. Anyway, so for example, at a micro level, family traditions often change over time, such as, and spoiler alert, Christmas traditions regarding Santa. So as children grow up, for example, they stop believing in fairy tales like Santa, and they no longer leave milk and cookies for the big boy. All right, that is an example of a micro level family tradition that may change over time and commonly does. Similar with the Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy, all that sort of stuff. That's an example at a micro level. I gave you a macro level example with the Marriage Equality Bill, and I'm sure you can think of lots of different examples off the top of your head as well. But with that concept of continuity and change in mind, our next task that I want you to do is I want you to go back to this diagram here, and I want you to highlight elements that you think could change in one color. So you're probably going to need 5 different color highlighters for this lesson. Sorry about that, but is what it is, I guess. Get lots of different color highlighters. Or you might want to underline or circle, whatever you do, different things. I want you to highlight, circle, underline, whatever, things that you think will experience change in one color and things that will experience continuity in another color. So for example, if I go back to my example of Patrick, I'm going to highlight that as a continuity. He's going to be my son for the rest of his life and the rest of my life. Nothing can change that. You know, nothing will change the love that I have for that boy. So that's something that's going to continue over time. If I put something like school, for example, like being an actual teacher, that may change in the next, I mean, don't you guys worry, that may change in the next 5-10 years. So that's something that could experience change in the future, especially for you guys if you're working at KFC and absolutely slaving away, frying chicken. That may change, or it may not. You may love that life, and that's all power to you. But that may be something that's likely to change for you guys. So I just want you to think about that as it moves across. Lastly, a last summary task I want you to do in your big boy book is I want you to identify an influence from your micro, meso, and macro world and explain how this either created change, or created continuity, or remained a continuity in your life. So for example, an influence at your micro level might be your parents. Is that a change or a continuity in your life? Explain why. Then do a meso level example, macro level example in your big boy book. That's it for lesson 4. Grazie.